Nailing down a retirement income that you can count on and that will last you is obviously important. And there are roughly 1 gazillion variables that you can muck around with to get it just right. But there are 4 that pack a particularly large amount of weight and have a dramatic effect on everything else. My name is Reese. I'm a chartered investment manager, a fellow of the Canadian Securities Institute, and a financial planner. And I like long walks on the beach. Today, I'm going to illustrate 4 retirement income variables by running you through a fairly typical situation using the most delicious financial planning software in the business, Conquest. And yes, Conquest is the bee's knees, not just because it's really smart, which it is. I mean, the artificial intelligence that's built into this thing is absolutely crazy, but because it takes a lot of really complicated data and equations and shows it to us in a way that we can really grab onto, really easy to understand and work with. Super user-friendly. And today we're going to look at a fictional couple named Lou and Sue Badu, which is tough for me to say with a straight face, but that's also how I like it. Anyway, here's the basics of their situation. Lou and Sue are both 60 and are going to live until 90. Long-term inflation is going to be 2.5%, might be more, but we can plan for that later. All of their planning, advice, and investment fees will be 1.4% all in. Now, I know that's more than a third less than what most people pay in Canada, but based on their account values, that is the absolute max that they would pay if they were working with us, because we're cool like that. Both of them have balanced investment portfolios, and they each have 225 grand in RRSPs and 75K in each of their TFSAs. And they're adding $500 a month into each of their RRSPs. Now, in terms of their public pensions, they're both going to get 100% of old age security because they've lived here forever. And we're expecting 85% of the maximum CPP benefit for Lou and 75% for Sue, which they plan to take when they retire. And yes, they have a home worth $1 million and no more mortgage, so no debt. And here's what they're hoping for. They both want to retire at age 65, and they feel like they could be comfortable and do a bit of traveling on $6,500 a month. And that's it. A pretty straightforward situation. But is it doable? Well, right out of the gates, with no strategic planning at all, they're actually not too far off. They are tracking at 82% of their goal. And what that looks like practically is that they will have a shortfall of income in the last 8 years of their life. Now, they do have a home, so they could either downsize or just sell it and make all of their shortfalls disappear, but they like their home and they don't want to move, ever. So we're just going to leave that as a backup option, which is actually my preference anyway. So we have to nail down their retirement income in other ways. And this is where we start with the big 4 retirement income variables, because these are the ones that tend to have the most impact. The first is whether or not they think they're actually going to need the same amount of income throughout their whole retirement. Is it going to be constant, or should we actually phase it? Most people expect to spend quite a bit more in the earlier years of retirement than they do during the later years of retirement. And as cheesy as it is, these phases or stages are often known as the go-go phase, the slow-go phase, and the no-go phase, which are all pretty self-explanatory. Lou and Sue find this entirely reasonable, and so they decide to just build this right into their plan. They feel like they'll probably decrease quite a bit of their traveling after they hit the age of 75, so they decide to drop their expenses to $5,500 a month at that point, and then keep it there for about the next decade. And then for the last phase, they feel like it's pretty likely that they're going to need even less, and so they drop it again, just by a smaller amount this time, by $500 down to $5,000 a month for the remaining 5 years. This is a game changer. They've gone from 82% solved to 96%. From 8 years of income shortfall to 2 and change. And since they're pretty sure that this won't even change their quality of life in retirement, this plan is a keeper for them. But they're not quite there yet. They're still at 96%. So the next big variable that we want to look at is, when do they plan to retire? What would it look like if they held off for just 1 year? Again, massive. It took them from 96% solved to 107%. Now they have some buffer room. Perfect. But not so fast. Sue is having none of that. And she's not retiring alone because they have travel plans together, so neither is Lou. 65 it is, and back to 96%. Which brings us to big variable number 3. tweaking their retirement expenses. What if they were to drop their retirement income by just 5% across the board? What if they just spent a bit less? Rather than $6,500 a month in the go-go phase, what if they just spent $6,175 a month, and so on? What would that look like? 104%. And Sue is sold. She's pretty sure that they can and probably will easily make do with even less than that, so for her, this is the way to go. However, before committing to spending less than what they had originally wanted, I recommend that they look at one last big variable: maximizing what they can get out of their public pension plans. Now, as you may know, delaying OAS and CPP past the age of 65 comes with some pretty fat increases. Now, I've done other videos on that, so I don't want to go into too much detail here. Plus, this software does all the math for us immediately. So let's just look at it. Delaying CPP until age 70 will get each of them a 42% increase. Now, delaying that benefit means that they'll have to spend more of their own investments earlier, but it takes them from 96% solved to 101%, and it actually adds $120,000 to their estate in the end, which means that even though they spent more of their own money earlier, over the long run, they actually ended up spending less. Part of the reason for this is because not only is CPP guaranteed, but it's also indexed to grow with inflation. So it's an ever-growing amount, which puts less strain on what you need to pull out from your own investments. And it's the same for OAS. So what if they delayed OAS to age 70 as well? Well, that would give them a 36% increase in their OAS pension. And we can see that it did give them a bit of a bump, but not nearly as dramatic as CPP. And again, that's because you get an increase of 42% for delaying CPP to age 70, where you only get 36% for delaying old age security. And of course, if they delayed their old age security, would also mean that they would have to spend even more of their own money earlier, leaving them quite dependent on these plans and therefore somewhat more dependent on the government. Plus, what if they end up passing away a little earlier than expected? Which is a fair question. And it's probably one of the key reasons why a lot of people just don't delay either pension, or if they do, they only delay one, and usually CPP, because it's the bigger bang for buck. The point is, we've taken Lou and Sue Badu from 82% to well over 100% from a number of different angles, and you can do the same thing. And if you do a few of these in tandem, you can actually build a very serious buffer for yourself. Now, obviously, there are a whole bunch of other variables that you can look at that will impact your plans, such as how much you're investing, what you're investing in, which accounts you're taking out from, and in what order, affecting your taxation, yada, yada. And we look at all of that every time for every client. But these four in particular pack a ton of weight.